All right. Hello, everyone. This is the Editor Group Product and Design Sync weekly meeting, and I usually dominate the top part of the agenda, so I was just going to turn it over to you, Michael.
Thanks for that, Eric. So first of all, thanks for fielding a lot of the feedback from the 14.0 release with respect to the top nav and the sidebar. So lots of constructive feedback, which is really helpful for the team. So this week, took a look at refining the styling for the themes and the colors. So that issue is good to go. So I'll update the badge on that after this call. But yeah, that one's good to go. Some of the feedback about the larger screens was one thing that I've been talking. I talked to Paul about last night, and like we talked about like some ideas around that. So that seems pretty interesting that we can iterate upon that in the future. I also talked to Paul about patch and snippets creations from the web IDE, and whether it's a good idea or not a good idea, and like the general flow. I have a better understanding of that whole flow from a developer standpoint, and I'll look to refine what I took a blind stab at last week of like creating the flow for that. So I'll look at refining some of that over the next day because I'm off on Friday.
That's great. I've been really enjoying watching the conversation async on that issue, so I'll look forward to seeing how you synthesize that conversation with Paul, because clearly like there was more to it. Really, the problem area that I was looking at when I created the issue and kind of started thinking like we should pick this one up, it was more like, hey, if you maybe don't want to commit, there might be something else useful you can do with that. But obviously there's some like more involved considerations that have been coming up in that thread, and for those that haven't been following, like the other reason it came up is because we're doing something in the VS Code extension to create patch snippets from VS Code that you can just like kind of retrieve quickly and insert right in the editor in the IDE. And we thought, well, it might be time to dust off that old idea and ship at the same time, or ship at least close with it. But it's been a great conversation between multiple groups, and I'll find the link and put it in the issue.
Yeah. So my takeaway from that right now is that snippets creation also depends on the project having snippets enabled. So it's something that we need to do a check for, and we need to account for if we do want to introduce creation of snippets somewhere. Whether creating a snippet while you're committing something is the right idea or not is like probably something to be determined further for us. But the patch, the way Paul was describing it to me, and he explained it in his latest comment as well, is that it has this potential to be like a super like. So instead of making multiple comments and suggestions, you could just create a patch file from the web IDE and then bring that over into the world of a merge request review and just have that one comment, and then the person reviewing can then decide whether to apply that patch and thus see the difference, or just look at the file itself. So it opens up the doors for that kind of thing. And this is probably going to be a cross collaboration with the code review group. But yeah, I think we'll do something. But yeah, it probably won't be a creation of a snippet at this moment. Like it might be more focused on patching. So yeah.
I was thinking a lot about that too, and other people on the call, Chad and Matt and Amy, might not understand, might not have seen the chatter, but we're working on defining some Q3 OKRs, and one of them I'm trying to wrap my head around is like the improving the usability broadly between the web IDE and the MR workflow, and I think this falls in nicely there. things like having comments show up in the web IDE, discussions from the MR show up in the web IDE, things like we've talked about, even the commit flow itself. Those all would fall under the umbrella. We need to figure out what makes sense for that quarter and where we can make the biggest difference. But I think this is right in line with that same theme. We don't have to wait till Q3 to do this, but I'm just saying, like, this is an area that we should be improving for sure. Yeah, I'll just
on that note, I've started using CodeStream, which is a third-party integration for JetBrains IDEs, and I think they have others. Just because, and they asked me for feedback, but I said, we want to ideally dogfood everything within GitLab, so I wouldn't see this being widely used within GitLab, but it is probably an interesting thing to look at to see how they do it. CodeStream, and apparently it's free now for individual usage, I guess.
Cool. I'm just shaking my head like this because the first screen on there has like a comment box next to 2 files, which looks very eerily similar to one of my explorations of like, oh, you can do comments in the web ID with this. It's just like interesting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I tend to not like to integrate this stuff in my IDE, but some people do. It's a preference.
Cool. I'm going to look at this a little further. Thanks for pointing that out. I think just to go back to the topic of feedback from the 14.0 release, to summarize, and we talked about this before, but to summarize, the feedback on the top nav has been, in the issue, relatively critical, though minor and constructive. So I've been encouraged by the types of feedback we're getting, and considering the volume of people that have been exposed to the top nav, is actually a very small number of people who are pointing out things that aren't working for their workflow. So I think it's been great. I'm glad to hear that you're already talking to Paul on some of the changes. I also would like to highlight that some of the feedback is summarized as like, there's a lot of empty space and left now in the top nav, and the fact is, like, this was an iteration. It was a big iteration. It was a big change, but we knew that, like, the whole top nav, there's a vision for it, right? We've kind of thought about maybe that search bar being bigger and what happens to the icons over there by the user menu, and can we extend that functionality or make it a little more cohesive. That's not the spirit of our way of working. We found a smaller area that we could ship right away, and we shipped it. And so now people are responding to the fact that, yeah, like, we could have probably done a more holistic overhaul of the top nav and shipped it in 14.5 or 15.0, and then that maybe that we wouldn't have gotten that feedback, but we wouldn't have received this really constructive feedback, at this early point. So very happy with how the feedback's going. And similarly for the content editor, it's very validating for our roadmap. People are pointing out things that are missing in the content editor that we know are missing, that we know we're doing next, and that some of them, like images and tables, were actually already planned for 14.1. So we're on the right track there. And shifting gears to embedding snippets in the content editor. We don't need to do a huge sync on this, but that is something that Matthew's going to be helping out, breaking down the designs into MVCs, or an MVC, and hopefully getting that into 14.2 as part of this exercise. So anything that you've started to explore? I know I gave you sort of an artificial deadline of the end of this week, so you might not be ready to share or anything, Michael, but if you have anything you want to chat about, feel free.
Yeah, nothing to really share at this moment. I think everything is similarly connected lovely for me this week. So with the world of snippets, there was an issue that was brought up about it not looking right on mobile, and I discovered that like our snippets behave differently on GitLab.com versus like an external site. I have no idea what's going on there. I don't know if one's an older version or one's a newer version, but yeah, there's different behaviors. But then that kind of got me in the mindset of snippets. I feel like there's going to be a flow that uses contextual menus to look up a snippet that you want to add. So that's something that I'm going to dive deeper with Enrique tomorrow. So yeah, tomorrow is going to be a fun, busy day. But yeah, so far this week was more focused on the navigation stuff. And yeah, just figuring out how snippets and embedding them works. But yeah, it's confusing why they're different, but yeah.
Yeah. I've also taken this opportunity to learn a little more about snippets. We have snippets has been somewhat on the back burner since we took over all the categories in the editor group, and I haven't looked super closely at the process for embedding them in external sites. So just writing the issue, for example, I learned a little bit, but I had not come across this mobile interface, which is not ideal. So this is great. I will leave it there. It sounds like you're going to have a great conversation with Enrique on this. If you want to, you could add me and Matthew as optional. Depending on what time it is, we may or may not join, but it might be interesting to listen in, or just record it and share afterwards. That would be fine too. I will be sure to watch it if I can't join. I will transition over to docs specifically because I was having a one-on-one with Matthew yesterday, and he asked a question like about stable counterparts and like what's the relationship with tech writing like, and I said, well, not everybody is as good as Amy, but she's very proactive and we've had a great relationship working with tech writing. Previously, we were one of many groups assigned to a tech writer, and we have been getting a lot of your wonderful attention. So I just wanted to share that praise publicly and transition to over here if you wanted to voice over your section for a minute.
I'm still amazed that we got those docs updated. That took the entire team, and it actually happened. So it gives me hope that if we make more major changes to the UI, that we might actually stay in sync.
Yeah,
let's not talk about tech debt. Just future changes.
It really was great. It was great because we had you involved in the early stages. The whole tech writing team got involved in reviewing and rallying around the changes. So yeah, I don't want to imply that it was a singular effort.
It was not.
The whole team, rallied behind the global changes to the docs that were necessary, and to keep them in sync and get everything launched, right when it needed to be was just really satisfying. And it shows that when you have a chance to involve your stable counterparts early in the process, identify those things. I also highlighted that in the process of reviewing the docs, we learned about some areas that we maybe hadn't considered, like in the admin section, or the edge cases that we maybe needed to account for in the design. So it was really good to have you involved and the whole tech writing team involved early on.
Yeah, Matthew, what you will see when working with me is that I am probably the nosiest and most forward of the tech writers in our current team, because that's just how I roll. I don't know what I'm going to catch until I catch it. And this one was a particularly big one. If it works better to talk with David to get an idea of how I work with teams. David and I have worked on a previous team before. So it's very much a case of, oh, you again. Cool. But yeah, we should talk. I can show you how my workflow works and bring you up to speed pretty fast. You two will assign me things.
I'd love to coffee chat with you and see what your workflow is like. I'll throw some time on.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, I think with that, we're at the end of the agenda. We have 2 minutes before we have to jump to the backlog refinement session, but any parting words? I'll take that as a no. All right, thanks everyone for joining, and I'll see a couple of you in 2 minutes.